Imagine being locked in your bedroom by your own mother, having your love letters stolen and burned, being forced down the aisle sobbing in front of 500 of the world's most powerful people. And then, on your honeymoon, your new husband calmly looks you in the eye and tells you he never loved you, he never will, and the only reason he married you was for your money. That was Tuesday for Consuelo Vanderbilt. If you're new here, welcome to The Forgotten Throne, where we dig up the royal stories that history tried to bury. Hit subscribe right now, because the story you're about to hear is one of the most jaw-dropping true stories of betrayal, control, and survival that the Gilded Age ever produced. And trust me, it only gets wilder from here. In 1877, Consuelo Vanderbilt was born into what most people would call a fairy tale. She was the only daughter of William Vanderbilt, heir to one of the greatest fortunes America had ever seen. On paper, her life was flawless. Grand mansions, European vacations, silk dresses, and a name that opened every door on the eastern seaboard. But every golden cage is still a cage. Her mother, Alva Vanderbilt, was a woman who treated ambition like a religion and her daughter like a chess piece. Alva was obsessed with cracking the iron wall of old New York society, the kind of people who looked down their noses at new money, no matter how many millions were behind it. And Alva had decided that Consuelo was going to be her ultimate weapon. From the time Consuelo was a little girl, Alva ran her life like a military operation. She forced her daughter to wear a steel rod strapped along her spine for hours every day to perfect her posture. If Consuelo spoke out of turn or showed a flicker of independence, Alva reached for her riding crop. When the girl once dared to express an opinion about her own clothes, her mother shut her down instantly. "I do the thinking, you do as you're told." That was the household motto, and it worked. By the time Consuelo entered society as a debutante, she was breathtaking. Tall, graceful, poised, and quietly miserable. Offers of marriage flooded in almost immediately. Men couldn't take their eyes off her. But Alva had already made her decision. Only a title would do, a duke, a prince. Someone who could plant the Vanderbilt name firmly in the soil of European nobility and make all those stuffy old New York families choke on their envy. The problem was, Consuelo had already given her heart to someone else entirely. His name was Winthrop Rutherford, handsome, well-bred, from one of New York's most respected families. By any reasonable standard, he was a perfect match. But Alva didn't want reasonable. She wanted a crown. Consuelo and Winthrop kept their relationship desperately secret, both of them terrified of what Alva would do if she found out. Then, just after Consuelo's 18th birthday, Winthrop seized his moment. During a chaperoned bicycle ride through Riverside Park, he pulled her aside and proposed. She said yes without hesitation. The timing couldn't have been worse. The very next morning, Alva was shipping Consuelo off on a sweeping tour of Europe, the real purpose of which was husband hunting among the aristocracy. Winthrop promised to follow her across the Atlantic and elope the moment they returned. Consuelo spent 5 months floating through ballrooms and estates across Europe, shaking hands with counts and earls, smiling on the outside while quietly waiting for the man she actually loved to show up. He never did. What she didn't know, what she wouldn't learn until years later, was that Winthrop had followed through on his promise. He had tracked her all the way to Paris. He had shown up at her door. But Alva had already figured out what was happening. She turned him away at the gate, refused him entry, and when his desperate letters arrived, she intercepted every single one and threw them into the fire. As far as Consuelo knew, the man she loved had simply abandoned her. Alva had one man in mind, and she was done playing games. His name was Charles Richard John Spencer Churchill, the 9th Duke of Marlborough, old family, famous name, Blenheim Palace, and almost completely broke. Here's the brutal irony. Everyone assumed Consuelo was the one angling for a title. In reality, the Duke was the one hunting for money. He had inherited one of England's most magnificent estates and almost no cash to maintain it. Alva Vanderbilt's daughter, with her $3 million dowry, was his financial salvation. And Alva, thrilled to get her Duke, couldn't have cared less. When Consuelo returned to New York and ran into Winthrop at a society ball, the truth exploded between them in a single dance. He told her he still loved her. He begged her to elope. And for one fragile moment, Consuelo felt like she might actually be free. Her mother was watching from across the room. That night, Alva dragged Consuelo into her private chambers and erupted. When Consuelo, for perhaps the first and only time, stood her ground and said she intended to marry Winthrop, the consequences were immediate and devastating. The next morning, Consuelo was told that her defiance had triggered a heart attack. Alva was dying. The doctors weren't sure she would survive. Consuelo folded. She sent word to Winthrop breaking off the engagement. She gave up the only man she had ever chosen for herself, and Alva, She made a miraculous recovery almost the moment the news reached her bedside. From that point on, the outcome was inevitable. Alva orchestrated the engagement to the Duke like a Broadway production. Lavish parties, carefully planted press stories, and Consuelo on display like the prize she was always meant to be. The Duke proposed at the Vanderbilt cottage. He was polite about it, clinical. He looked more like a man signing a business contract than someone asking a woman to share his life. When the engagement was announced, the newspapers had a field day. Another million-dollar Duchess, they sneered. Another American heiress trading her family's fortune for a foreign title. The mockery stung. But it was nothing compared to what came next. November 6, 1895, St. Thomas Church, New York City. 500 guests, flowers from 3 countries. A gown chosen by Alva, bridesmaids chosen by Alva, every detail of the ceremony controlled down to the last ribbon by Alva. And walking down that aisle in front of some of the most powerful people in the world, Consuelo Vanderbilt was visibly, undeniably crying. Everyone saw it, nobody stopped it. The honeymoon began, and the Duke wasted no time getting things straight. With the detached calm of a man reading a weather report, he told his new wife the truth. He had married her to save Blenheim Palace. Full stop. He was, furthermore, completely in love with another woman, and had been the entire time. He had no interest in romance between them. He required an heir. That was the arrangement. Those were the terms. Consuelo arrived at Blenheim Palace a broken woman. Her husband spent most of their honeymoon quizzing her on the Spencer-Churchill family tree, terrified his American wife might embarrass him in front of his aristocratic peers. And yet, England fell in love with her. Commoners lined up to catch a glimpse of her. Aristocrats competed for her company. She was charming, compassionate, and elegant in a way that made the Duke look even more hollow by comparison. She threw herself into charitable work and became one of the most genuinely beloved figures in British society. She gave her husband his heir, a son, John Spencer Churchill. Then in 1898, a second son, Lord Iver. Her contractual obligation was complete. What happened next was either tragedy, scandal, or the most understandable rebellion in history, depending on how you look at it. The Duke had installed his mistress, the vivacious Gladys Deacon, so thoroughly into their world that she eventually displaced Consuelo entirely at Blenheim. Meanwhile, Consuelo stopped pretending. She took lovers, including, briefly, Winthrop Rutherford, the man who had been stolen from her years before. When Winthrop proposed elopement a second time and she rushed to the Duke for a formal separation, she believed she was finally free. Then Winthrop changed his mind. His excuse was so pathetically weak it was almost insulting. He claimed he was too attached to her to go through with it. Consuelo went back to her marriage with nothing left to lose. And if she couldn't escape, she was at least going to stop being invisible. Over the years, she had affairs with no fewer than 3 of the Duke's own cousins. A form of defiance so pointed it could only have been intentional. One footnote to this entire catastrophe. Before Consuelo produced an heir, the next in line to inherit Blenheim was a young politician named Winston Churchill. The birth of Consuelo's son freed Winston from any obligation to the estate and allowed him to pursue politics without distraction. He was reportedly quite grateful. History owes a strange and sideways debt to the misery of Consuelo Vanderbilt. In 1906, the Duke and Consuelo finally separated. The divorce took years of bitter court battles to finalize. But the most stunning moment came when Alva Vanderbilt, now reinvented, improbably, as a prominent suffragette, took the witness stand and confessed everything. She told the court she had forced her daughter into the marriage. She begged the judge to grant the divorce. The woman who had destroyed Consuelo's youth was now, in some small way, trying to give her back her life. In 1921, the divorce was granted. On the 4th of July that year, and the symbolism could not be more perfect, Consuelo married again. His name was Jacques Balsan, a French aviator who had first seen Consuelo just before her 18th birthday and had never stopped loving her. He adored her openly and completely for the rest of his life. In her autobiography, The Glitter and the Gold, Consuelo described her years with the Duke as the glitter. All surface, all performance, all emptiness. Her years with Balsan were the gold. She had found it, finally, at tremendous cost. But she had found it. In 1956, grief returned. Her youngest son, Lord Iver, died of a brain tumor at 57. 2 months later, her beloved Jacques followed him. In the space of 8 weeks, Consuelo lost the 2 people she loved most in the world. She lived out her final years quietly on Long Island, one of the last living witnesses to the Gilded Age, that era of impossible wealth and invisible suffering. She died on December 6, 1964, at 87 years old. Consuelo Vanderbilt was sold by her own mother. trapped by a society that valued titles over human beings, and survived it all with more grace than anyone around her deserved. She was never the million-dollar Duchess. She was always so much more than that. If this story hit you the way it hit us, you know what to do. Like this video, subscribe to Forgotten Throne, and share this with someone who needs to hear it. We uncover the real stories behind the crowns, the titles, and the gilded lies every single week. The throne may be forgotten, but we remember,